We're live in 3, 2, 1. All right. Hello, welcome everybody to our 4th episode at Deliberation Academy for the 4th of July. Hello, Mark. How are we doing today?
Pretty good. It's been a moderate week for the news, I think. The weather has been incredible, even a little bit hot, I might say. And that's interesting because there is, in fact, a giant heat wave rolling through the southeast portion of the country and into the Midwest. Not to get all Weather Channel on everybody, but it's very, very hot. I think it's partially related to the giant dust storm rolling over the country, and I think that was from, I can't remember exactly where the dust storm came from, but there's a big giant cloud of dust rolling over and the temperatures are soaring, and it's getting into lethal ranges of heat now. I didn't know this before this week, but did you know that the #1 weather that kills people in America is actually heat? You'd think it might be tornadoes or something, but it's not. It's actually heat. So it's getting really, really hot, especially in Texas and Oklahoma and Florida, I think, are sort of getting the brunt of it. But we're also feeling it over here in Colorado. It's almost 100 degrees today.
It's heating up here in California as well, but it's nice out.
Yeah, so it's going to be nice and hot for the 4th of July, I'm imagining.
Yes, and one of the other things that we're supposed to be seeing later on today is the fireworks display at Mount Rushmore. That's starting to become a little bit controversial due to the whole COVID-19 situation of masks, no masks. Is it appropriate to be celebrating this way as the numbers continue to rise in the overall COVID-19? We recently did a podcast that's covering the whole COVID-19. In our previous section with my brother Marcus Carrion, who's an epidemiologist. I really recommend that you go and check it out. But that's another thing that we are seeing today is with Mount Rushmore with President Trump, kind of anticipating to see what he's going to say and the type of rhetoric that he's going to be using. So it's kind of looking forward to seeing that. So,
are the fireworks themselves actually controversial? Or is it just the gathering of people? So I gotta be honest, there's not a lot of people out there in South Dakota.
That's true.
It's not a very highly populated region. It's not terribly close to everything. I actually was at Mount Rushmore this last summer when I was moving my sister out of New York, and Mount Rushmore is actually free to enter right now. You would think that it would be free to enter anyway, but it's free to enter right now, or at least it was when I drove through maybe about a month ago. So I don't know what the deal is with that. I don't know if the fireworks are the controversial part. I don't really understand that. I think they do a lot of fireworks around there in general, and it doesn't seem to be a big problem. And Crazy Horse, it does a bunch of fireworks. I think they do them almost nightly. Yeah. Crazy Horse is an interesting place. Crazy Horse, I think, is actually owned by a Native American tribe. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, Crazy Horse is on the backside of Mount Rushmore. It's Crazy Horse, as you might imagine. So progress on constructing it has been incredibly slow. I went 10 years ago, and I went a month ago, and it looks exactly the same. So they're not making a ton of progress, but I think they are doing good things for, So
this is what we're looking at right here. Crazy Horse is what you're referring to?
Yeah, that's the one.
I actually did not even know that was on the backside of Mount Rushmore. Wow.
Well, not like on the same piece of rock, but like it's literally like, I think it's like 5 minutes away. It's like right next to it. They're really close.
So they do fireworks pretty much every day there?
I think so. They do night blasts. Maybe that's them actually blowing up stuff. I'm not totally certain. It looks like they do a fireworks show.
Right. But I guess what we're really starting to see is if we do Mount Rushmore fireworks, fireworks.
Ooh, those look cool.
Yeah. So if we go here, I mean, just right off the top, of course, Donald Trump wants fireworks over Mount Rushmore. Like, how does that, look at it, the first two that pop up right off of Google, and they're both CNN. Trump set for another massive event during national pandemic. Fireworks return to Mount Rushmore. When we scroll down, there's probably people commenting on tweets, but let's just focus right here on CNN for a second, because I feel like this type of rhetoric right here, of course, Donald Trump wants fireworks over Mount Rushmore.
It's not really the most professional.
It's not only is it not professional, but it's just like, what are you trying to suggest here? Because it's obviously it's either an opinion piece or something. You know, I mean, it is CNN. CNN has lost its reputation over the years. Everybody admits this. Like, you know, even on the left side of the political spectrum, it's just they've kind of somewhat lost their reputation to some extent. I mean, you know, maybe we'll see more of a.
Yeah. Well, I mean, anyway, it definitely is a sort of, you know, snarky title for the article. You know, but I think I can see a little bit where they're coming from, just because, you know, this isn't the first gathering that has happened under the Trump administration during the pandemic. Like I was saying a minute ago, you know, I'm not totally certain how large a fireworks show at Mount Rushmore would actually be in terms of people turnout, just because it's in the middle of nowhere. It seems more like they might just broadcast it. I mean, I'm not totally certain.
Right.
But
Neither am I.
It does make me kind of think, you know, like, it wouldn't be the first time. And it is for, you know, our nation's independence, which is an interesting topic, you know, especially in light of recent things going on in the country politically. But, you know, I do think that there is something to be said for trying to, you know, have some kind of positive stuff. Maybe, you know, like, there's a lot of crazy things going on right now between the coronavirus and, you know, political marches and, you know, things going on in the rest of the world that are alarming.
Not to mention, the economy as well is starting to.
You know, and the economy. So, you know, sometimes it's kind of nice to just be able to have something positive and try and, like, be united on some kind of front. I mean, that article looks a little bit like they're just trying to take a stab at him for anything that they possibly can, which I guess is fair. But, you know, I don't know. I'd rather focus, you know, today on just thinking, you know, about what's going on in the weekend. You know, what does the 4th of July really mean for us? Probably going into the 4th of July, you know, this week, CHAZ has been sort of disassembled, at least partially, or CHOP. I'm not sure why the name is, I don't know if those are actually two separate places, CHOP and CHAZ. I thought they're the same thing. But the point is that it's the one in Seattle, at least, is being taken down. They've been moving barricades. And so that's kind of a positive thing, I think, mostly because the CHAZ has sort of devolved into violence a little bit. There was a few people who got shot to death this week, I think, inside of there. It was interesting is I read an article about CHAZ getting taken down and some people being interviewed. And one of the representatives who was being interviewed was said, you know, the violence was here before and the homelessness was here before and all this other stuff was here before. We inherited all these problems, which I thought was an interesting word to choose, inherited, because it's like, you know, nobody asked all of you guys to take on this zone of the city, right? Like, in fact, I think a lot of people asked you sort of specifically to not do it, and you did it anyway. So you, at that point, in my opinion, you kind of lose the right to complain about inheriting the problems of that area. You know, like, once you forcefully take over an area and install barricades to keep police out, now it's, you know, when things like murder happens, in my opinion, it's sort of your responsibility now. When you have kept the police out because you said the police can't be trusted, now all those things sort of fall on your shoulders, in my opinion. So it seems a little snarky to say, oh, well, he inherited these problems. Yeah, well, nobody asked you to inherit them, you know. And of course, I think some of the more right-wing media is looking at it as like, yeah, we should have taken it down in the first place because now it's too late. Now we've lost lives and stuff, which, to be fair, is true. You know, lives are lost in this zone. It's debatable whether or not that would have happened if the zone wasn't there. But the fact of the matter is it was there. It did happen, you know? So lives were lost in this CHAZ. And there was also, you know, a huge sort of gathering of armed people, which, you know, I'm all for exercising your Second Amendment rights. But it's alarming when you're seeing people getting murdered.
Especially when there's no real sovereign state behind them, that it's just people with guns. You don't know if they're really law enforcement. You don't know their reputation.
Well, we know they're not law enforcement.
Well, we know they're not law enforcement, but supposedly they had local law enforcement set up, but they didn't have, at least from my understanding / perception, that they didn't have like any real uniforms. So people were just walking around holding weapons, assuming, you know, maybe they're good, maybe they're bad. I've also seen another video of a guy just holding a pistol just because he's like, well, there's no law enforcement in here. And this is my law enforcement, so I got to take care of myself, which is a very interesting concept, you know, because at the end of the day, that's a very pro Second Amendment argument that you are responsible for your life. But what, I mean, to some extent, I mean, you don't have to accept that position, but some people believe it. Some people.
No. You just reminded me of something that happened this week. Sorry, keep going.
Okay. So another concept, like, you know, CHAZ, like, it's been very, very controversial, but at the same time,
the McCloskeys. Sorry,
the McCloskeys.
I just wanted to bring this up because it's very, very sort of relevant. There's this couple, the McCloskeys, and there were protesters sort of marching through their yard, armed protesters actually, and one of them brought out an AK, and his wife brought out a handgun, and they told the people to like keep moving. And then, you know, CNN tried to turn them into like these devils who hate black people. And when interviewed, the guy was saying, well, it was Cuomo who interviewed them, and he was saying, he's like, dude, they broke down a gate and came through. And he said, well, they were on their way to the mayor's house. And he says, well, the mayor's house is not even in my neighborhood, so I don't believe that. And he says, you know, we were scared for our lives. And Cuomo says, well, it's not like they stormed your house. And he's like, yeah, my opinion is they didn't storm my house because I was standing in front of it with an AK-47.
What's this guy's name again, real quick?
I think it's Mark McCloskey. Yeah, Mark McCloskey.
McCloskey.
Yep.
Okay. It's actually quite frightening. Here, I'm just pulling up the picture so people could see. Just, you know, shared from Google. You see this, Mark?
Yeah.
So what we see, this is the famous picture that everybody saw. The guy, you know, with the polo shirt, the belt, you know, the pants. He looks like he probably spent some time on Wall Street. The wife,
Possibly.
who's got she probably has a concealed carry permit and carries that in her purse at all times. I mean, she just kind of looks that way. Not trying to judge or anything, but like that is very, very frightening, especially if for a man of this guy's status. You know, like, whether or not you believe his wealth was inherited or whatever, I don't know anything about the guy, but I do know that, like, to be able to get into that type of neighborhood, you know, typically you have to work very, very, very hard, right? So like, let's just make the assumption that you work very, very hard to get there. And if you had a riot, you know, a mob coming down the street, you know, seeing everything that's happening in the news, whether you're a Trump supporter, whether you're, you know, a Democrat or whatever, like, that is actually scary. Like, to just see hundreds of people outside of your house, and it almost sounds like the French Revolution, like King Louis, like the mob is coming to take off your head. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely fascinating. I don't know, like, you know, those pictures, I think, frame the subject a little bit, which in a kind of not a fair way. But it looks a little different to me when you see, you know, like, what they were saying, right? Like, oh my God, go away.
Yeah.
God, this is so annoying. Right. So I mean, there was a lot going on here. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's just make this fast forward here. There. So they broke through the gate.
Oh yes, they did break through the gate. So
Yeah. So
that's
like,
alarming. So that I mean, right away, it's just like somebody's in your backyard. And I think I heard an argument where somebody was saying that the way that private property was constructed, the whole area was a gated community. So once you enter that gate, it can be, one interpretation of the law can be that it's like it's fair game, that they're
yeah,
on your property.
yeah,
And
definitely.
that's
I mean,
very
it's certainly alarming.
right.
Anyway, but it is. I just wanted to bring that up since you brought up the whole, exercising of the Second Amendment rights there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very interesting. I wonder if we're going to see any potential charges for this man in the future. I think that's something that
I
would,
doubt it. He was armed on his own property, so I doubt it. He didn't hurt
right.
anyone. He didn't
And
shoot at anyone.
right.
Like,
That's
you can't. Last I checked, it's not illegal to brandish a weapon on your own property.
mhm.
And if it becomes illegal, I think that's going to be a
it
problem.
it just depends where you are and the current political climate. And because like what about that one police officer who was shot with a taser, or the suspect shot a taser at him, that
Oh
incident.
yeah.
And he was recently charged with felony murder, which I heard from another source that felony murder is supposed to be a charge that's tacked on. So like, let's say you murder somebody in the event, like you're doing a bank robbery or some type of other type of felony. So it's a tack on charge. So it's not even like a real charge. And so like I think we're starting to see some type of people are starting to ignore the rule of law to some extent, and they're starting to just use the state apparatus of our legal system to bring about justice. And that's kind of scary a little bit.
I think it depends on what story you're looking at, because at least what I'm looking at, who is it? The now fired Atlanta police officer who faces felony murder charge for fatally shooting Rashard Brooks last week kicked the 27-year-old man after he fell to the ground. After Rolfe shot Brooks, he exclaimed, "I got him," kicked Brooks as he struggled for his life and failed to give him timely first aid, Howard said.
Right. I mean, I don't know
Ooh, the
too much about
video, he looks like he's kicking the shit out of him. So
is
I
this
don't
the
know.
same? Is this the same one? Are we talking about the same one where the guy shot him with the taser, and then the other police officer shot him? There was two police officers on the scene. One of the officers shot a taser, and then the other one.
I don't know. I mean, obviously, I don't know. But in the interest of keeping things kind of rolling smoothly, I guess we can leave that to the viewers to kind of do their research there and make their own, decisions on what they think happened.
Okay.
In other news,
What are the things that I had an idea when you were talking about CHAZ is like the CHAZ, like it's been very, very controversial, obviously, whether you support it or whether you don't, everybody has their different perspectives. But let's just hear the other side of the argument for a second. And like, because like what they were trying to do is like change the public narrative, but obviously there are very radical people in that, CHAZ unit, who actually did organize and take the area. But I think by and large, so, you see mostly moderate people who are not necessarily dedicated to using the violence as a mean to use politics. So one of the things that I think of, like the concept of CHAZ would be very interesting is like, if we could have some type of central location such as CHAZ, but we could guarantee the rule of law and your safety to actually try to come up and have real conversations. Like if you're in this area, like we're trying to essentially have like a private, deliberation for how we should change the entire system. You know what I mean? Like how we could fix everything.
I don't know. It doesn't seem necessary to establish this autonomous zone. Like, how can you say that you're going to have this autonomous zone with the rule of law if part of the thing is that you need to kick out all of the law in order to make it an autonomous zone?
If it's a voluntary city that does this and says, hey, this is our centralized free speech area, everybody within this zone is like we're all here because of one reason, which is that we want to try to come up with the real solutions and problem to the problems we're facing in the nation.
Yeah, but
And
isn't that supposed to be the whole nation? Isn't the entire nation supposed to be in the safe free speech zone?
it is, and that's like, it's sad to say, but like that's no longer the case anymore. And
I think it's
or,
no longer, I don't think it's necessarily the case inside of the CHAZ,
mhm.
because I don't think that inside of the CHAZ you could have free speech that was, say, contrary to their opinions. You know,
you are correct.
do you think you could have walked inside of CHAZ and said, hey, I think what you guys are doing is wrong. I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I think you're going about it the wrong way. And this is what I think. I don't think that you would probably be received very well. So it's not really a free speech zone. It's more of just this is a zone where you have to think this way, you know, instead of a zone where you have to think another way. And I understand that there is sort of a lack of free speech in our country. Well, that's debatable. I think you can still get away with saying a lot of stuff today. I think you can't necessarily say a lot of things, you know, outside of the PC realm without without possibly being doxxed or, you know, cancel cultured or any number of awful things. But I think in general in America, you can pretty much say whatever you want at any time, you know, aside from yelling fire in a movie theater. But like, and I don't think you're allowed to say that you want to assassinate certain people. I don't know if that's actually a myth. It seems like it's probably a myth. I feel like there's way too many people who say stuff like that for it to not be a myth. But, you know, if the purpose of it was to be a zone for people to have a voice in a discussion where they felt like they weren't having a voice anymore, I don't think it's really accomplishing that by pushing out all of the people who are on the other side of the conversation. You know what I mean?
Unless those people are dedicated to not having a conversation, which appears to be the case, at least in some instances. A lot of the moderates, like, they're willing to at least hear the other side. You know, they might come to like a real disagreement. You know, like a lot of people are, you know, they draw their line on certain things. You know, for me, you know, it could be like the Second Amendment is where I draw my line, but other people, they draw their line where at other positions. Some people do it free speech. Some people do it over immigration. Some people draw their line in other places, and we're starting to see more of just a polarization of where that line is actually drawn, and it's confusing.
So these are some of the demands that were, you know, put forward. So CHOP and CHAZ are actually the same thing. It just depends on who you're asking. So NPR, I guess, interviewed a bunch of people, and all the demands were decentralized. There was no kind of like leader. But NPR reported there are three main demands listed by protesters. One, cut funding for city police by 50%. Two, redistribute the funds into community efforts such as restorative justice and healthcare. Three, ensure that protesters would not be charged with crimes. That third one seems pretty fascinating to me.
Right.
I mean, when you're like looting or shooting people, or, you know, and not obviously not everyone was, but I think throwing that third thing in there is a little bit, I don't know. I think maybe no one will be charged with crimes if they did nothing violent. You know, I could totally get behind that. If you didn't do anything violent, fair. Okay, I can deal with that. But like, I mean, I don't know. To be fair, this is, you know, I'm just looking at Wikipedia, so take what you will of it. It might not be that accurate. I think the cut funding for the police was something that I'm certain was part of it. 50% seems like an arbitrary number. It just seems arbitrary. I don't know.
Right.
I
wonder how many people do you think were actually part of like in the Seattle location, or versus across the nation that immigrated to CHAZ to just participate in this movement?
How many people were in CHAZ?
Yeah, let's CHAZ, because it appeared to be pretty strong, and I would imagine that a lot of people, you know, came from all over the United States to visit this autonomous zone. And one of the things that I'm thinking of is like, well, they all have to leave unless they all decided to stay in Seattle. And one of the things that like we don't necessarily know is what those people are going to do, afterwards. There are people calling for like the overthrow of the United States in there. Obviously this is not all people, but I mean, like when you give people a position to create this type of autonomous zone, like that's a lot of time to plan something. And like going into the 4th of July weekend, it just appears alarming because like I've started to have like conversations with people is that the 4th of July, it's such a politically meaningful event in our history. And if you really want to make a political point against the nation state of the United States of America, the 4th of July is a great day to make a statement. And I'm not suggesting that anybody should, because I don't think that that's a good idea. But it is worrisome, and I'm starting to notice that normal people are having these conversations more, and I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Isn't this neat?
Yes.
Yeah. I guess apparently somewhere in here it says it started out as a joke. Well, not like literally a joke, but like people would be like, "Oh yeah, you're in the autonomous zone."
I mean, yeah.
And then it blew up.
People were making fun of it, and then it came.
Yeah.
All
powerful imagery. Powerful imagery.
Right.
I don't know what this means. 12. Fuck 12.
That's the police. So it's basically saying fuck the police. Can you zoom in? Can you zoom in? I think I see Easy E right there. That's like.
Oh, here? Yeah, that's Easy E.
But can you like?
Well. Oh.
CHAZ, abolish ICE. So they want to. Some people want to abolish ICE. That's interesting.
I mean, to be fair, ICE did some. ICE. I feel like.
Is that an Illuminati thing? There was like an eye with a.
Yeah, there was.
Like,
it was
some people.
It's
probably just like people trolling, too.
Oh, almost certainly. It's people
a lot of people are just like, people don't care anymore. Like we're all kind of fed up. Like we can't trust the news. Like there's no, you watch the news. There's nothing good on. It's just like shoot. Like let's just watch the new Hamilton show on Disney Plus. Like I guess a lot of people are going to be doing that because like nobody really wants to pay attention anymore. Like it's just they lost our trust. Yeah, I can't believe CNN. I can't believe Fox News. Like I don't believe any of them anymore. And I think this is kind of starting to be more people are coming along these accepting these views is that you just can't trust the news at all anymore.
Which is fascinating because the news, one of the primary outlets of the news is Facebook. And Facebook, the CEO, Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, so brashly decided that Facebook is not the arbiter of truth, end quote, which is fascinating because I think this week you sent me that Facebook is blocking links to third-party channels like 4chan, which is very interesting to me because if you're not the arbiter of truth, who are you to say that you can't share these things? And yes, I think there's a lot of people who will say that 4chan is sort of a den of hate speech, but I also think that's not entirely fair
because it's also not. Yeah, it's also not. It's also not.
It's just like
everything,
Reddit, right?
It's just like CHAZ. It's just.
It is really. It's there's no regulation or moderation, and you can see what's actually going on there. Well, not.
And then
really
you got the nuts. But you got. I don't know. I don't go on 4chan. I just know that I heard it through the news, and so one of my friends said to me, and they were like, "Oh, look, they're blocking 4chan." Like I knew what 4chan is. I don't go down those rabbit hole sites. But
4chan didn't used to be the rabbit hole. 4chan used to be like at the forefront of the internet. Oh man,
which is crazy. I don't know if you want to explain a little bit more about that, but
I mean,
I tried. Like I confirmed this myself. Like I got a link from 4chan and I tried sending it on Facebook Messenger, and then there was an error that says no, you cannot send this on Facebook Messenger. So I was like, wow, that's pretty interesting. I think we're starting to see.
Fascinating because that tells me that. sorry, I was going to say that
No,
that's
no, no,
also
yeah.
that Facebook is not being an arbiter of truth, but they're sort of being an arbiter of political agendas, which I think could probably tell you something about Facebook's political agenda. I think, if you look at what happened with Reddit recently, I think it was, who was it? One of the co-founder of Reddit decided that he was going to step down, and he wanted to be replaced with a person of color. He put out like this whole big message, and there's people crying out that Reddit is racist or has these dens of racism and things. And when Reddit started, it was a lot like 4chan, which was really just an area of the internet where anyone could get together and create, or at least view, anything. And I think that there is obviously there's something special about that. Obviously, it can be used for bad. In my opinion, technology is inherently neither good nor bad. Technology is technology, and it's how you use it that makes it good or bad. And it's easy to say, well, we just limit the things that you can do with certain technologies. You're allowed to own firearms, but you're not allowed to murder, but you are allowed self-defense. Things like that, right? We try to put rules onto different technologies in order to make them, more safe for society. But I think free speech is a fascinating one in particular. All these companies are private companies, and they have every right to decide what kind of content is on their websites. But it's interesting to me to consider what the kind of ramifications of that are, because if the only place where you can really see what people actually think is like 4chan, or websites that are sort of deeper into the net than that, I think we'll start to see all the people who are counter to the culture start to concentrate in certain places, right? I don't know. Obviously, that's just speculation, but I think it's fascinating that Facebook has decided they're not the arbiter of truth, but they're willing to sort of block these things. And, in talking about 4chan, I don't know the reason why 4chan is blocked. It could potentially be because, a lot of people say that 4chan has a lot of racism on it. And right now, there is, in fact, a boycott over Facebook advertisements going on with over 800 companies, including Coca-Cola, who have pulled their ads from Facebook over their failure to monitor hate speech. And that's fascinating to me too. I think it's important that we kind of consider, what is hate speech? So let's just dive into that for a second. What is hate speech? Hate speech is defined by Cambridge Dictionary as public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. Which is a sort of an open-ended definition, honestly.
Yeah, no, that is a very open-ended definition. And right when I heard that, I had to look up the definition of hate. So I just use Google to do this. So it's their common dictionary for whatever Google is. And hate, the definition is feel intense or passionate dislike for somebody. The boys hate each other. Or it's a noun, intense or passionate dislike, feelings of hate or revenge. So that's very interesting.
So I think the thing that you got to get here is you need to pull out the what is it, the conditional clause there. So it would really be public speech that expresses hate or violence towards a person based on something as relates to religion or sex or sexual orientation. So you can say I hate Jim, which is fine. That's fair, because that's not technically hate speech because it's not based on race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation. However, if you say I hate Jim, or I hate Catholics, or which, I was raised Catholic, so I see the sentiment there. But, or, I hate black people, or I hate white people, or I hate, gay people, or any kind of group bundle of people, or saying you hate someone because they're inside of a certain group. But what's interesting as well about this definition is that it says, towards a person or group based on something such as race, religion, sex, or sexual orientation, as in not limited to those things, but just those are some examples, which means that technically, could you, under this definition, say that like, I hate Republicans? Is that considered hate speech? I don't know. Under that definition, it seems
well, I mean, if you look up the definition of hate again, it's a significant dislike. So I think that you are onto something here. That you technically saying that you hate Republicans is an act of hate speech. But I don't think that that's necessarily the case of how it's been used. At least the term recently.
I mean, we got to look into. I wonder how Facebook defines hate speech specifically.
Okay, that's a good question.
Let's see. Facebook removes hate speech, which includes content that directly attacks people based on their race, ethnicity, national origin, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, sex, gender or gender identity, or serious disabilities or diseases. Which is a sort of, again, less open-ended definition, but still sort
Race,
of
ethnicity, national origin, religion affiliation, sexual orientation, sex, gender, identity, or serious disabilities or diseases. That's interesting because
that's actually not what it says. I'm looking at it on Facebook's site. It's
okay.
That's wrong.
I mean, this is Wikipedia, fake news. It's probably
I mean, Wikipedia is usually pretty good, but yeah, okay, that's what I'm looking at.
Okay, so they have a pretty big.
If you go down just to number 12.
Oh, there's tier 3 content. Calls for segregation. That's interesting because we've seen like Black Lives Matter type movements call for some segregated like type classrooms and stuff like that, or at least they like demanding their own spaces on campuses and stuff like that. Like it depends, like because there's a loose definition of segregation. So like let's look up what segregation even means. I looked up 4chan just to like show people. Here's
dude, you don't want to be on 4chan.
Yeah.
Look, Zoom won't even render 4chan stuff.
Okay. Oh, it didn't render it?
I got the website, but it blocked out a lot of the stuff. That's neat.
Okay. Well,
we do allow criticism of immigration policies and arguments for restricting those policies.
Okay.
Huh. We do not allow hate speech on Facebook because it creates an environment of intimidation and exclusion, and in some cases may promote real-world violence. It's interesting that they don't consider Facebook to be part of the real world. I think for such a huge, massive tech company that's sort of like revolutionized the way that the world operates today, I think that they should understand that like Facebook is part of like the real world. You know what I mean? And obviously like your interface with Facebook, makes it feel like it's not part of the real world, but like we've gotten to a point where the internet is pretty integrated with most people, I think. So I think I feel like it's fair to say that most things on the internet are part of the real world at this point, This is an interesting definition. We define hate speech as a direct attack on people based on what we call protected characteristics: race, ethnicity, national origin, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, caste. That's an interesting one. Mostly I say that because the caste system, at least in India, the caste system was officially abolished. So it's, I wonder what they're talking about when they say caste, or who that's directed at. Sex, gender identity, and serious disease or disability. We protect against attacks on the basis of age when age is paired with another protected characteristic, and also provides certain protections for immigration status. We define attack as violent or dehumanizing speech, statements of inferiority, or calls for exclusion or segregation. This is like a really kind of hard to wrap your head around definition. And like, I know there's gonna be a bunch of trolls out there who are like, it's right there, dummy. Don't you understand? And it's like, yes, I can read. I'm not an idiot. I just read it to all of you. But what I'm saying is that it seems that these like protected characteristics, while it feels like they tried to get a whole like cover a lot of ground.
There's no, they don't give any examples of hate speech. That's very interesting to note, because if they had specific examples of it, because we have seen more controversial things being removed from hate speech. I mean, like we just talked about 4chan, but I mean, like there's more things that they have done. I know like Twitter hasn't Twitter already blocked you know, some of Donald Trump's tweets, like whether or not you agree with it or not. Like just the idea is like, you know, he's the president of the United States. I mean, like I get it as a political message to block his stuff, but like at the same time, it's like, wouldn't you want all of the Americans, the whole world to know that?
So they do have some examples here.
Yeah,
they do have some examples here.
okay.
So dehumanizing speech or imagery in the form of comparisons, generalizations, or unqualified behavioral statements to or about insects, animals that are culturally perceived as intellectually or physically inferior. That seems like an unfair definition. That are culturally perceived, well, my culture doesn't perceive it as an inferior animal. You know what I mean? Like that's saying, well, you can call someone an elephant, but you can't call someone a cockroach. It's like, well, in a nuclear war, cockroaches would survive and elephants wouldn't. So who's really superior? Yeah, you know, I feel like that's kind of an open-ended thing to talk about. Filth, bacteria, disease, and feces. These are all things that you can't compare people to, or, you know, basically you can't compare people to any of these things according to Facebook. Right?
Here's something according to Facebook. You said some huge generalization, but something that I have seen as part of like this movement of CHAZ is this ACAB. Well, all
yeah, but that's not a protected group.
Why not?
Because you have to choose to be a police officer, right? You're not born a police officer. You're not assigned to be a police officer. You weren't drafted into the police. You could leave the police. It's a personal choice you made. So it's like the same thing as saying, you know, all Nazis are bastard. You chose to be a Nazi, you know?
Oh,
you could stop choosing to be that thing, right?
Right. Yes, that is true. And that's, you know, then you hear the calls to fund the police, and cops are quitting. It's interesting time.
This is also considered hate speech. Mocking the concept, events, or victims of hate crimes, even if no real person is depicted in an image. Mocking the concept of a hate crime. I've never seen that happen in real life, I don't think. I mean, I can understand why that's in the definition, but I don't think I've ever witnessed somebody mocking that.
Mocking the concept of a hate crime?
Uh-huh.
Aren't we technically, according to a very, very, very loose definition, wouldn't like me suggesting that why not ACAB be considered something like that?
I wouldn't call that mocking the concept of a hate crime.
I mean,
designated dehumanizing comparisons, generalizations, or behavioral statements that include Black people and apes or ape-like creatures. You know, I'm just going to share this so you guys can all see what I'm looking at.
Okay.
I don't need to, like, all right. So here we are down here. Dehumanizing comparisons, generalizations, or behavioral statements. Black people and farm equipment. Jewish people and rats, Muslim people and pigs, Muslim person and sexual relations with goats or pigs, Mexican people and worm-like creatures, women as household objects, transgender non-binary people referred to as it. Huh. Designated dehumanizing comparisons, generalizations in written or visual form that include Black people and farm equipment. You can't, all right, I'm not trying to say that I need this or anything, but this one, I understand where it came from and why they're upset about it, but it also seems like, where do they draw the line for that? I don't know. Like, does that mean you can't have a picture of a Black person with farm equipment? I don't
even understand the significance behind that. I mean, like,
are they trying to slavery saying that they're laborers and that's all they're good for? I think.
But that's a ridiculous proposition, in my opinion. You know, like, when I don't think of Black people, I don't ever like. I mean, like, I understand like the idea of slavery, but I don't associate it with farm equipment like that.
I don't know, but that's, you know, that's what they say, right? This is interesting
Okay.
that these are only tier 2, which is not something that will get removed, I guess.
Oh, so those are all that will get removed right here.
Yeah, do not post.
Okay.
Tier 2, physical deficiencies, hygiene. Really, hygiene? So it's okay to say all cops are bastard, but it's not okay to say people who don't shower or smell like shit? Come on. Like, you chose not to take the fucking shower. You chose not to brush your teeth. That's on you.
And that would be objectively true if you think it smells. If it smells, it smells. You know.
Yeah,
If
I
it
mean,
smells like
come
crap,
on.
it smells like crap.
Physical appearance, okay, I mean, I guess I could get that. That's not fair. Like, if you're, sometimes you get a shitty draw, sometimes when you're born, you hit every ugly stick on the way out of the tree, and that sucks. I don't know. Mental deficiencies, intellectual capacity, but not you can't call people dumb. Education. Well, I could see that, I suppose, but it's also true in a lot of cases. There are a lot of people who are illiterate and uneducated, and on all sides of the spectrum. I have also seen a lot of people saying, that there's a lot of like country bunkin' ass Trump supporters who are,
That's
illiterate and
something
uneducated. And this is technically says you can't do that.
Yeah, that's mean. You can't say that you're uneducated. That's hate speech.
Yeah, and it is strange because there are a lot of uneducated people in our country. We have a lot of pretty high education standards, but yeah. Mental health. This one I think is decent, not how they defined it. Generalizations that state inferiority. So saying that you're inferior because you are mentally ill, retarded, crazy, or insane. This is kind of hard to digest on. Content targeting a person or group of people on the basis of their protected characteristics with generalizations that state inferiority. Wait, so this is still only protected groups. So you have to be one of these protected groups in order for this to apply at all.
So they're saying hate speech only applies to groups, but it only applies to a specific amount of groups, which are the specific amount of groups that they chose, which is race.
Not groups, but groups, yes, but not like groups, more like categories, I guess. Right, like race, ethnicity, national origin, religious affiliation. So really, you can say a whole bunch of this stuff as long as it has nothing to do with their race, ethnicity, national origin, religious affiliation, sexual orientation, caste, gender identity, or serious disease or disability. Which is fascinating because, that is strange
like going back on this idea of the caste system, could you make the argument that like one interpretation of the caste would be the legal class? Like
That's what I was talking about in India, but
yeah,
that was officially abolished.
But they have that as part of their definition, caste. So
yeah, I know. That's why I said it was like strange to me because I don't know who it's applied to today, unless what they're saying is, they recognizing that it has been officially abolished in India. However, there are still people who, act on the caste system. It's still very alive in a lot of ways.
Right, but discriminating against a caste group, and what I'm trying to suggest is like, is it possible to interpret caste and police officers as a part of being some type of caste? Like I mean, they have the word in there for some reason. I don't understand why, but they have it in there.
Yeah, I don't know. This is
people are just
kiss my ass, eat shit. This is
probably why they banned 4chan.
This right here, man, this is like the battle cry of the Americans who are pissed off about something. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
you're a fast food worker and you're having the 800th customer come through the drive-thru and be as shitty to you, and you say, "Kiss my ass, man!" Throw their hamburger at them. I don't know. But this is wild to me. You can't refer to the target as genitalia or anus, as in you can't call someone a dick on Facebook if they're in that group. Isn't that strange? Like, all of this stuff is fair game unless it's in relation to one of these protected characteristics. Isn't that wild? This is a very sort of open-ended policy.
Right.
Anyway,
and it's like part of me wants to, you know, suggest that like they should just let everything happen on their site. But then like if they were obviously that to happen, like people would abuse Facebook for its ability to network effectively. And like what we would probably see is an uptick in some type of like terrorist cells or something like that, of people abusing this system. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I don't know about that. That doesn't seem really
fair
like, to me. I think terrorist cells are not going and arranging their meetups on Facebook. Like,
but the KKK, you know what I mean? Like, would the KKK not have, if they were allowed to operate openly? I don't even know if they are on Facebook. If they were allowed to, like, what you don't think that they would try to organize stuff? I mean, like,
they might.
It's possible. It's possible. So I see like how this is like a huge problem of like the interpretation of hate speech, because like you have to like prevent something like that, but like at the same time it's,
well, do you have to present something like that?
well, you don't have to, but
well, no, I'm saying
it seems obligation.
Does it seem like obligation, or is the social benefit actually greater for people being aware that these groups are doing things and organizing?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're on Facebook and you're aware that groups like the KKK are organizing an event or whatever, and you can see that and it's public knowledge, you know, then you're more empowered to go and protest the event, right?
That's true.
You know, if it's arranged underground and it's only with them, who's going to show up to say, hey, don't do this?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know. I can see it both ways, but I also think that limiting the types of things that are acceptable, you know, to talk about and represent and things is dangerous, because I think it causes groups that support those things to be pushed underground, and which sounds nice. However, I think that means that they'll be pushed underground and they'll be arranging and organizing events without anybody really knowing about it or paying attention. And then before you know it, then you have, you know, a terrorist cell, right? Because you've had this group growing and working together quietly without, you know, any sort of scrupulation from the outside world for a while. So I don't know. I think the free speech thing, I'm pro free speech. I know that people will say things that are hurtful and mean and awful. But I'd rather live in a world where, you know, people can say hurtful, mean, awful things than live in a world where I am, you know, crucially punished because I said something that was interpreted as mean, cruel, or horrible. You know, when I was growing up, we had a saying which was, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. And although I don't necessarily agree with that, I think words can definitely leave long time mental scarring and emotional scarring, at least in my experience. I do think that they are better to be on the outside and made available to people instead of letting them fester. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I'm not sure. I would say I'm definitely pro free speech. I'd rather someone be shitty to me with their words than find out that, you know, out of nowhere some group has organized and we never even saw it coming. You know, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I mean, what do you put it like that? Like, I definitely see that. I mean, I would probably accept your position that I agree that maybe radical free speech might be a net benefit for all of society, you know, just so we know exactly where the crazies are.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the thing is like, unless you have, you know, pretty radical free speech, you know, where do you draw the line then? Because, you know, we just looked through this whole policy about how Facebook tries to approach hate speech, right? And it was pretty long and also not like super duper clear. I mean, it was, I don't know about accurate. I don't think accurate's a
clear is probably a better word.
Yeah, maybe just not super clear. You know, like if you breeze through it, you're like, oh, okay, don't be a dick, right? Like that's the gist of it. But but where do you actually draw the line? And I think that's why you get things like this that are so long and sort of drawn out with all these examples and these different tiers and all this other stuff. Like, because where do you draw the line? And I think the more that you are willing to limit things that you don't like to hear and think are hurtful, it's a continuum, right? Like, start here and way over here, you're not allowed to say anything, and we move this way a little bit because, we don't like certain word. And then we move this way a little bit more because we don't like the ideas of a certain group. And then we don't like this because it reminds us of that. And then we don't like this because it reminds us of that. And like, you know what I mean? Like, it's a continuum. So where do you draw the line? I think it's one thing to say speech that directly endangers people. Maybe we should consider that, like yelling fire in a crowded movie theater can directly endanger people, right? Because if you do that, people can get trampled and actually die because of words that you said, and that can happen immediately, right? But like saying that you hate a certain group of people while inflammatory and not very fucking nice doesn't necessarily endanger those people right away, but it does make it so that people know where you stand. And I think that's important. I think it's important to know where people stand. I am a proponent of transparency. I want people to tell me where do they stand and how do they feel about me, because I'd rather you just shoot me straight. If you hate me or you have a problem with me, tell me. Maybe it'll hurt my feelings, but at least I know where you stand, and then I can move forward with that information. When we suppress the way that people feel about everything and the thoughts that everyone has, it just goes back to what I was saying before. You just get cells of people who find other people who think like they do, and then they pop up out of nowhere. I think having radical free speech gives us more opportunity to see where the crazies are and to address them directly. But it requires a certain, bravery and constitution and will to confront people about things that are uncomfortable and scary. And I think a lot of people don't like confrontation.
What's actually surprising? That the people on the more conservative side of the political spectrum who are advocates, for the economy, free markets and all that, they would make the argument like, oh, if you don't like it, you can leave, or if you don't do this. Well, if you don't like Facebook, like you could make another Facebook. You know what I mean? I understand like making another Facebook is a huge task. It's like, there's a whole marketing and coding and like it's years of, investment inside of Facebook itself to get to where it's at. But like in theory, like they could do it and we can make another, platform similar to that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Facebook's really that necessary. I don't have a Facebook anymore. And I got to say, I'm a lot happier. For several years, I really only used it for storing photos and messaging. And then one day just kind of snipped it, pulled the plug. And I got to say, my life does not feel any emptier. I still keep in contact with the people I care about. I don't see a bunch of inflammatory nonsense every 5 seconds. I'm not being blasted with advertisements every 5 minutes. There's just a lot of things that I'm just enjoying not having Facebook. I think at its core, it was cool. When it first came out, it was rad. It killed MySpace. MySpace died.
Tom, poor Tom.
Yeah, Tom was everybody's friend.
Dude, everybody misses Tom, man.
Everybody does miss Tom. But, and the reason I think that happened is because Facebook took the idea of MySpace and then, made it about connecting with your friends. And now Facebook is not about connecting with your friends and stuff. Now Facebook is about like advertisements and political stuff and like all this other crap. And it's just like miserable, to a certain extent. Even look at YouTube. I remember when YouTube was fresh on the scene. I think I was in like 8th grade or 7th grade or something. And YouTube was awesome back in the day. Now it's just a bunch of boners like us talking about politics and the news and like opening packages of stuff. Like YouTube sucks now compared to its heyday, back when it was just whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think you need Facebook, honestly. When Facebook has been seeing people leaving Facebook, I left Facebook, I'm one of the number, right? I don't know. I think we might actually all be better off without Facebook. you know?
Maybe.
I feel like Facebook encourages people not to actually have conversations with other people and understand how to confront people in real life. You know, one of the things that I've noticed at school is everybody's so passionate. Everybody's so passionate about everything, and that's great. I love it. I love the passion. But what I don't love is that they have all this passion, but are too frightened or too weak-willed or whatever it may be to actually confront people and talk to them about their passions. You know, not just yell at them about their passions, not yell at people because their passions are not aligned with their own passions, but to be like, I'm passionate about this. I'm going to put in the work to try and get you to understand my passion. You know, it never seems to be that way. And like, it doesn't seem like people are willing to have a conversation about any of these issues that they're so passionate about. It's just, oh, well, you don't agree with me, then you're an idiot. Like, well,
Right.
maybe, could be an idiot. I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but, you know, maybe we just don't see eye to eye, and we should work on getting on the same level so that we can understand each other, and then maybe we can make some progress. And I feel like a lot of the reason that, you know, these kids don't want to have these conversations is because there's just nobody gets any practice actually talking to humans anymore. It doesn't seem like, you know, like I had to actually interact with humans every time I wanted to talk to someone growing up. Like, you
Isn't
know,
that weird to say?
every time I wanted to talk to anybody, I had to like interact with a person, you know?
Right.
God, just even calling my friends was like, ooh, uncomfortable. You don't know who's going to pick up the phone, you know? Like calling my girlfriend back in the day, who knows who's going to pick up the phone? Yeah, who is it?
Pretty exciting.
It's Mark. Can I talk to Brittany? Like, you know,
Yeah.
but you had to actually deal with it. You know, I had to have conversations with my girlfriend's parents and my friend's parents and all these other people. And, you know, everybody had to actually like talk and communicate. And now no one seems to do that. It's so easy to become detached through a screen. I've noticed even in myself, you know, like texting or writing messages over Facebook or like whatever, you're so much more willing to say certain things and send certain things than you would otherwise. You know, like, oh my God, look at like people sending each other nudes, you know? How often in public would you just walk up to someone you've met 5 minutes ago and be like, check this out, you know? And just like, you know, that's like, no one would do that. But yet, like with Snapchat and like Instagram and, you know, texting and like all these things, it's just like everybody's willing to send nudes in like 5 minutes. It's wild, you know? Like you're so much more willing to say things and send things when you're detached through this little screen. It's like you're not a real person and they're not a real person. There's this, you know,
You're alienating yourself, actually.
you're alienating everyone. Everyone's alienating themselves and each other, you know? Like, so I don't know. I'm a big proponent of the no more Facebook. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I do enjoy Snapchat. It's how I keep in contact with my sisters and my mother. We mostly send each other pictures of dogs and flowers and stuff, and you know, I enjoy that. But like, I do think that the general electronic culture has sort of an effect of making it so that people are not as capable of having real conversations with actual other humans. And I think that's super duper important, because then when you go out to protest, you're protesting in person, you know?
Making assumptions about the other person without actually talking to them. All they know is that Black Lives Matter or all lives matter, but they don't actually talk to the person. They just assume that whatever their worldview of how they think that the world is constructed, that however they perceive Black Lives Matter, all lives matter, they lump them. You know, this idea, like you talked about on one of our previous episodes, this idea of bundling. All of these ideas are connected together, and it's not necessarily true, and it shouldn't be the case that they're all connected together.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just a lack of communication. You know, one of my favorite lines ever is from the movie Cool Hand Luke. And if you haven't seen Cool Hand Luke, go watch Cool Hand Luke. It's Paul Newman in his heyday. It's a fantastic movie. It says something about the, you know, the spirit of man. You know, and if you're a woman, It's still a great movie, and just pretend that Paul Newman's a woman. It's a great movie. It's a classic. You need to see it. And one of the lines in the movie is, what we have here is failure to communicate.
Oh,
And I'm almost certain that's from Cool Hand Luke. That might be from another movie, but I think it's from Cool Hand Luke.
Yes, we have it. I can actually pull it up on
it is. No, it's fine. It's fine. But the point is, I mean, in that case, it was a prison warden talking to Luke, being like, "Look, man, you gotta listen. You're the prisoner. I'm the warden. You do this stuff. I stand up here." Like, it was a different situation. But it is important to recognize that actual line, taken out of context, fail to communicate, is so poignant, because that is exactly what I think is going on in a lot of places around our country right now, is a failure to communicate. And not even necessarily like a failure, but even just like a total denial of an attempt to communicate. Everyone wants to yell and have their voice be heard. And I feel like on both sides, it's just yelling, and then you yell louder, and then they yell louder, and then you yell louder. And then before you know it, it's just like cacophony, crazy sound everywhere. You can't understand anything. Everyone's in a bad mood, and I feel like that's because this is totally speculation, and this is going to totally make me sound like just an old person. But I feel like part of that is because of the way internet culture works, in that, if you're having a debate online with someone and they disagree with you, you almost always see it escalate like insane. It just escalate, because there's no stakes. Like, you can, the rule of nature, or whatever you want to call it, where if you're a huge asshole, people will beat you up. That doesn't exist on the internet. So you can just be as much of an asshole as you want. Yeah. And they're never going to beat you up. You know what I mean? Right. So
unless you run into them in person, you're
but that's that's a whole
unless
other
you're
thing.
all lives. But I mean, it's kind of scary, and I don't try to get too serious. But unless you're an all lives matter person, you're running to a Black Lives Matter person, or unless you're a Black Lives Matter person and run into an all lives matter person, and then you have to confront what you confronted online with somebody else. And
but that's the point I'm getting at, is that when people are confronting these things online, there doesn't need to be this modicum of respect. There doesn't need to be this respect. So instead of being cautious with your words and trying to actually listen, and not just say whatever the top thing that comes off the top of your head, right? When you're actually having a conversation in person with another person, there is a sense of you're reserved a little bit. You think about what you say. I hope you think about what you say before you say it, at least for a second. And the odds of you trying to escalate a conversation into this violent attack on someone's personality or their character is unlikely, because that is a good way for someone to start a fight. And in real life, people don't like to start fights, I think, in general. But on the internet, people love to start fights. And I think that's because there's not really any stakes. You can start a fight, and you can pick on someone, you can be as mean as you want, and insult their intelligence and all these other things just because they disagree with you. And there's not really any risk of any kind of repercussions. And not that I want people to be getting beat up or anything, I don't. But I do think that we should be behaving in a way where we're respecting people. Respecting that, hey, man, if you said something really atrocious to me in real life, you better believe that I would do something about it, because I'm not going to stand by and let you say these horrible, horrible things, and I would hope that the people around me wouldn't let you say these horrible, horrible things, because your face is attached to the words you're saying. Everyone sees it happening. They look at you and say, look, that guy's an asshole,
Right.
Which doesn't happen on the internet,
Right.
And I think that's something that we're missing. I think there is this element of attaching your internet persona to your real world life, and understanding that, man, just because it's the internet, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. The internet is part of the real world today, but the disjoint, I think, that's still there is your internet identity and your real world identity are not really meshing, especially in terms of, personal morality. So,
Right.
but, again, that's speculation. I would hope people would try to be more civil in their discussions.
Especially when they're at home this weekend for 4th of July, talking to grandma, and she's old, she's a Trump supporter, or she wants Biden, whatever. The point is, like, it's 4th of July. Like, let's try to have a peaceful, somewhat happy 4th of July, and that's all we could really do, right? So, yeah. You got any other last minute things, Mark? I mean, I think we.
No, not really. I feel like we can, covered some interesting stuff today. I would like to say, happy 4th of July. I hope that we can all take some time to reflect on what the 4th of July means to us personally, what it meant for our country, what it meant for the individual types of people in our country, because it means something different to different people, and that's important to think about. So have a great 4th of July. Try not to get anyone sick. Try to enjoy things and not think about the disarray of the political environment and the rest of the world for 5 minutes. And, maybe we'll all feel a little bit less stressed out after this weekend. Let's hope so.
Yeah, great message. So I guess that's episode 4 for the 4th of July. And it was, wrapping it up with Deliberation Academy. Don't call me, I'll call you guys next time. See you next time. Oh, and please remember to like and subscribe to our channel, Deliberation Academy. We're just getting started. So if you guys could please, press that like button in the corner and subscribe to our channel. It would really mean a lot to us. We're just starting out. We're, just students basically, and we're just trying to get and change the narrative for everybody. So thank you so much.
And if you have any content or questions that you would like us to discuss or address, please feel free to leave it in the comments and we will get back.